Okay. Okay, folks are entering the room.
Namrata, just for your benefit, I won't be able to see chat either.
Okay, that's good to know. We'll just give folks a few minutes to come in, and then we can get started. Hi, everyone. For those of you who are joining us, we're just going to give a couple more minutes for folks to enter the room before we get started. Feel free to use the chat to introduce yourselves. Okay, I think it is safe to get started. Thank you to everyone that's introducing yourselves. Really appreciate it. Welcome to our webinar on building green software through standardization and collaboration with CAS Software, Entity Data, and UBS. Before we get into the main event, I thought I would introduce the Green Software Foundation, especially to those who are joining us for the first time. The Green Software Foundation is a Linux Foundation project, and we are a global consortium of over 60 organizations across industry, across the world, that are coming together to build standards, tooling, and best practices to ensure software is carbon efficient. We are aiming for a world where software has zero environmental effects. And for that to happen, we work with software practitioners and anyone software adjacent at every level, at every stage of their sustainability journey. The work that we do is really a product of our member organizations and the volunteers within our member organizations who are shifting culture within their communities, identifying knowledge gaps, and working with us to build the resources, the standards, the specs, the protocols, the tools to ensure software is more and more sustainable. We're really happy with the progress that we've made in the last 3 years, and we're proud to say that we represent the global software industry. All the successes, the insights, the learnings would not have been possible without the support and steer of our steering members, Accenture, Avanade, BCGX, GitHub, Intel, Microsoft, NTT Data, Siemens, and UBS. Today, you are going to hear, if you've been following our journey, actually, you'll know that this year has been quite eventful. We reached a major milestone in green software with the software carbon intensity specification becoming an ISO standard. At the foundation, we believe that standardized measurement is what's going to really create that sort of systemic large-scale change that we need to see to get green software practices and patterns adopted across the board. And we're really happy with what we've been able to achieve with the SCI specification and other tools like the Carbon Aware SDK, which would not have been possible without deep collaboration within our ecosystem. So today UBS is going to kick us off, followed by CATS software and then NTT Data. We are going to have a few minutes at the end of this webinar to take your questions. So continue to engage with us in the chat, plug in your questions in there, and we'll make sure we get them, we'll do our best to get them addressed at the end. To kick us off, we're going to, before we kick off, I just wanted to introduce all of our speakers. We have Massimo Crubelletti from Sales SVP and Country Manager for Italy from CATS Software. We've got Gadu Sundaram, Vice President for Application Services in the UK for NTT Data, and Pindi Buller, ESG Technology and Sustainable Technology Lead from UBS. We also have a special guest, Riccardo Marciani, Head of Agile at Autostrade per Italia, joining CAST Software today. So now to get us started, we have Pindi Buller from UBS. Pindi, take it away.
Thank you, Namrata. Hello, everyone. My name is Pindi Buller. I wear two hats. I work in ESG technology, and I'm also one of the co-leads for the Sustainable Technology Guild. Next slide, please. So thank you for inviting me to the GSF Member Showcase. It's great to be on this webinar. But before I start on the SCI use cases, I wanted to give a background of how we joined. So UBS publicly stated our net zero targets in April 2021. And as we're all aware, the use of technology contributes to emissions. So joining the GSF that year as steering members was not only pivotal, but it was also very timely. Just after our net zero targets, a few of us internally formed the Sustainable Technology Guild, which really brings individuals together that focus on reducing our energy footprint from all our software applications. And what we do in this guild is we share best practices, we're building tools, and we're also trying to help drive that behavioral change because technology impacts everyone. So the use of our software impacts how much energy we use, and this impacts how much energy we use in our on-prem data centers. And they form two of our missions, Scope 1 and Scope 2. We are also consumers of cloud services, and this largely forms our Scope 3 emissions. This data is then used to track against our net zero targets, and also part of our sustainability and our environmental regulatory reporting. And this is especially pivotal as we have upcoming regulations with the CSRD, CSDDD, and also the EU energy directives. So to help produce, we need to first be able to measure. And this is where the GSF and the collaboration across many organizations created the Software Carbon Intensity Specification, or SCI for short. And as Namrata has just stated, it has become an ISO standard early this year. So internally at UBS, we trial the SCI specification as part of the GCF use case initiative. And all that information is available on the GSF website. So I just wanted to step through some of the key things that we did. The details are all captured in our use case. First, we wanted to understand the software boundary. So we leveraged our internal data sources as well as data from external providers to calculate the SCI for 2 applications. And these applications were focused on just getting the emissions from our servers, which run on our on-prem data centers. So once we defined the boundary, we then started to focus on the functional unit. So what is the functional unit? This describes how the application scales. And there's a range of variables that you can use, from device, from data volume, from API calls. In our case, we use number of users, as this information was available for both of our applications we trialed. Once we'd got the R, we then started to break down what operational and embodied emissions data we needed. So for operational, we had to, first of all, understand how much energy is consumed by the applications that are running on the servers. And in this case, we use max power usage for each of the servers. And that data is already available in our central hardware inventory. The second key metric is the carbon intensity. And we obtain that data from the national grid of the country where the servers are located. And all that information is also available in our hardware inventory of where the location of those servers are. The operating time, another key component, we assumed the software is running all year, 24 hours a day, which gave us a time factor. And then finally, resource share. This is quite critical because most applications are running on virtual machines. So we derive the hardware usage data, again, from our inventory sources. And then finally, embodied emissions. So embodied emissions is the amount of carbon that's emitted during the creation and the disposal of that hardware device, whatever device that is. We were focused on servers. So we took the specification of every server and we looked up using the manufacturer's website of the embodied carbon emissions that they were disclosing. Now, in some cases, the servers were too old and the embodied emissions were not captured. In that case, we discounted them from our calculations. When software runs on a device, a fraction of that total embodied emissions of the device is allocated to the software. So this consists of both time and resource share. So for the time piece, we use the manufacturer's projected lifespan of that hardware to calculate the time share. And for the resource share, we use the same metric that we captured in the operational emissions. So the use cases were pivotal because, first of all, it enabled us to work through the specification in detail, to understand where that data can be sourced from, whether it's internal or external, and also how we need to refine and improve so this becomes more of an automated process within UBS. Next slide, please, Namrata. Thank you. Moving on, there's another key topic that I wanted to discuss. Early this year, we initiated a project in the standards working group that is focused on how we use standards, the tools, the principles and patterns, and implement them in organizations. So the project is called Transforming Organizational Software Sustainability, and in short, TOS. And the objective is to create a framework that encapsulates a decision tree and approach for organizations to firstly embed green software approaches, secondly, to transform with the goal to shift the needle to reduce those emissions, and finally, to use that software data to contribute to net zero targets, as well as the environmental regulatory reporting. So we started with brainstorming ideas. And the first thing that we did was, what constitutes a software project? So we jotted down key stages from business requirements to stakeholders, all the way to decommissioning. And then once we started to broach those subjects, we started to categorize key stages. And the drawing on the right-hand side on the bottom of that page are the 4 key pillars that we have started to work through. The first one is strategy. So this is really from the leadership, from the IT management team. What do we need in place before we can start to implement? Implementation. What are the key steps organizations need to do to implement standards and tools? Operational. When we're running, developing, and moving into production, how do we track, monitor, and reduce? And finally, the key one as well, compliance and regulations. As you'll probably hear further on in this webinar, these regulations are now starting to become more granular and detailed. So for more information on the TOS project, the data is captured and the information is all available on our GitHub pages. So feel free to review them and contact the GSF members for any further information that you require. Thank you, Namrata.
Thank you so much, Pindi. That was helpful, and we'll summarize a few of these key points towards the end. And don't forget, you'll have a chance to ask any questions that you have during the Q&A. So please keep note of them or just share them in the chat, and we'll try to pick them out. Next up, I'd like to welcome Massimo Probaletti, Sales SVP and Country Manager for Italy from Cast Software.
Thanks, Namrata. Thanks everybody for being here listening to me. No need to introduce myself, but I want to thank you a lot, my colleague Riccardo Marchiani from Autostrade, that is here to tell you about a quite important project that he's leading in Autostrade. Basically, it's about putting to the ground SCI methodologies and few other standards to obtain what is needed for complying with the current regulation that we have in Europe. So I will start with a quick introduction on the regulation that Pindu mentioned a few moments ago. Then we'll see how digital sustainability is key to fulfill, from an ICT organization point of view, to this regulation, and how we built, together with Riccardo, a methodology based on standards, including, of course, or starting from SCI, and how we obtained the results that Riccardo will talk about. Can you please change, Namrata? Thanks. As Pindu said, there's 2 main regulation active now in Europe. There are many others concerning sustainability, but these 2 are the one that has a higher impact on ICT. The first one is CSRD, that has been approved in 2023, and it will become operative very soon in all over Europe, and we'll see in a moment. But worth to mention, CSDDD, that is a regulation that has been approved this year, and probably it will become operative in 2027, but that will have a huge impact on ICT organization, because basically it brings what CSRD requires for the company sustainability report to the whole supply chain. So extending the responsibility of a corporate, not to his own operation, but to all the supply chain that they're using to do their business. Next slide, please. Okay, a bit more, because this is the key to understand what was the aim of the project we run with Ricardo. ESRS is basically the standard of measurement that has been elaborated by IFRAG as part of the CSRD. That's important because that defines the taxonomy of the measure that should be put into the books. By the way, as you can see, the application scope of CSRD is very wide. From January next year, all companies in Europe, local or global, above 250 employees or bigger than 40 million turnover, has to comply with this law. As you can see from the taxonomy on the right side, there's many areas. It covers clearly the whole aspect of sustainability from a corporate point of view. And today we're going to focus on the one that will more impact, that is more impacting IT organizations. Two characteristics of CSRD that explain why CSRD is changing. Sorry, is changing the landscape. The first one is the fact that CSRD will require external audits to the sustainability report as it's required for a financial report. So it means that the level of depth and the level of formality of these reports is much higher than ever before. And on the other side, the CSRD is prescriptive also from the calculation methods. They have to be declared in the books, and they have to be repeatable and auditable. So the whole content of the CSRD books will be much more accurate than before in any sustainability report I've seen myself, at least. Okay, let's see what is come back, please. Quickly, what are the impacts of ESRS E1 climate change on IT? First, it's needed to create transition plans. So not only measuring how much we are producing now in terms of carbon footprint, but what is our plan to reduce it in the next few years? What are the policies that our transition plan is based? What are the action we are going to take? What are the resources in terms of economical resources? What are the targets that has been set as in the transition plan? And most importantly, that all the scopes of the GHG emissions has to be included in these reports. So 1, 2, and scope 3. Please change the slides. Why all this has so much importance for digital portfolio? It's something that is probably obvious among us, but it's worth to repeat it. If we take a whole emission from an IT organization, between 67 and 94%, depending on the efficiency of the infrastructure, is due entirely to computation, to the application. So application, especially in IT-intensive company, has to be part of the equation. And on the right side, you see what we did with Ricardo to really arrive to ESRS report for the digital portfolio of Autostrade. First, calculate the embodied carbon of the digital supply chain. So beyond the hardware embodied carbon, calculate also the one in the supply chain for software. Calculate, and that's where we use SCI, what is the critical subset of application in the portfolio that are really important from a sustainability point of view. Then measuring the level of sustainability of each application. Then we use an OMG standard whose name is ASCRSM. Based on that, we have been able to calculate the reduction target for each single critical asset, the action needed to arrive to that target, and the resources in terms of work estimation. All this made Autostrade being able to build a transition plan from the current situation the final transition to a more sustainable portfolio. Next slide, please. Okay, just quickly, just to show you where Autostrade is now in the maturity journey. We run an as-is analysis with a due diligence platform whose name is Highlight. That basically helped us in calculating, and this is the one implementing the SCI index or the ISO 21031, and also helped us in calculating the embodied carbon for the full portfolio. Then on the critical application that has been deriving from the due diligence, we ran the calculation with the ONG standard I mentioned before, and through that we managed to determine the reduction target and transition cost and plan. Now we are in a situation in transition phase that will bring Autostrade to build their sustainability by design processes. That's more a change management job that we have in front of us, but it is the more challenging one. Now I can leave to Riccardo explaining you details and numbers about what you obtained. Please, Riccardo, to you.
Okay, thank you, Massimo. I'm glad to be here. Thank you for inviting me. Next slide, please. Just a few words about Autostrade. Autostrade is the major company in terms of managing motor. Sorry, do you hear me? Okay, so hoping that you hear me before saying that I'm glad to be here and thank you for having invited me. Autostrade, just a few words, is a major motorway company in Italy. We manage about 3,000 kilometers of motorway. We have a group that has 4.3 billion euro in terms of group revenues. We have about 9,000 workers, and we are more or less 4.6 million customers each day on our motorway. For us, for Autostrade per l'Italia, ESG strategy is a very essential one. So we are all in Autostrade very committed to ESG. So on this slide, you will find at bottom left some agency in which we have attained some ratings regarding ESG topics. And on the right, some certification about this context. So the ISO 50001 about energy management that allow us to optimize the consumption of our data center, and the ISO 14001 that about the environmental management system that allow us to measure and to use data to control and to pursue our strategy in terms of sustainability. Next slide, please. Okay, so as Massimo said, we have already done something in the 2022 and 2023 about moving to the cloud. We are our data center, 3 data center, but we decided in 2020, 2021 to move our workload on the cloud. More or less, we have an aim to move at least 60% of our workload on CSP. We use both AWS and Azure. And so already in this period, we obtain savings in terms of CO2 thanks to measurement that was obtained with the software provided by Kesta. In the half of 2024, we decided to perform an analysis on about 250 business application, all custom application made by Autostrade or our supplier. And we selected a sort of short list of 60 applications that are the more indicated in terms of green opportunity, in terms of saving, in terms of refactoring the software, following the SCRSM standard, as Massimo said before. There we obtained a theoretical savings of 24.8%. But we decided to pursue it with a more realistic plan that doesn't charge too much our dev team. So we optimize and obtain a 50.1 savings in terms of energy opportunity. Next slide, please. The idea is to proceed to a step 2, in which we try to enlarge our scope to the total of the application that was analyzed before, and try to put in place the action plan that, as Massimo said before, allow the tools that CAS provided to us in terms of define an action plan and try to estimate an effort in terms of mandates. So these allow us to negotiate with the different dev team the kind and an estimation of the effort that we charge them for implementing this action. For the step 3, there is a more ambitious one, as Massimo said before. The idea is to introduce some green gates in our CI/CD pipeline in order to monitor our major changes in software, in order to see if these changes follow our requirement in terms of sustainability, application sustainability. And these allow us also to introduce some KPIs, some requirement that we want to transfer directly to our software supplier in order to have more quality software, also in terms of sustainability. I finished. I really thank you for the attention.
Thank you so much, Massimo and Ricardo, sorry. Next up, we've got Gadu Sundaram, Vice President for Application Services at NTT Data.
UDX is working on adopting the SCI standards, and we heard Ricardo, like with Autostrad, and how he's adopting it. Like, so different kinds of organizations, and we had CAS software, a product provider, helping that, like the customers adopt the SCI. So my topic will be, I'll talk about something slightly different. So we, as Entity Data, one of the top 10 SIs in the world. We have over 30 billion of revenue and over 150,000 people working for us, working for various industries, various customers around the world. And so what do we do? We joined the Green Software Foundation in 2021. And there's been two sides of the focus. How do we transform ourselves? How do we use the standards internally? How we help our customers use the standards, but also like how we contribute along with this group of people, along with our competition, along with some of the large cloud providers, to then to improve the standardization and collaboration so that we can move the lever as an industry, right? Like for the entire industry, how do we move forward? So that's going to be my topic. And for this talk, I want to concentrate on 3 different communities from 3 different countries. And I'm going to talk about what they're contributing to developing those standards and how they're using it themselves, right? If you move on, Ramrita. So I'll start from the bottom. So the whole measurement. So you start with measurement. I'll talk about what our community in Italy did, the team in Italy that did for contribution to the standard, as well as helping customers. And then we'll move to Japan and then Germany. So if you move the slide. So in Italy, we've been involved in the development of the standard, in the software carbon intensity standard, that then sort of became the ISO standard. Where we've been involved, we've been collaborating along with the steering committee members, and also interestingly, here with one of our own customers. So customer and supplier together contributing to developing the standard, and then sort of this resulted, and then adopting that standard internally, where Entity Data then helped Intesa Sanpaolo, one of our customers, adopt the SCI standard to measure the energy consumption of software. So this is an example of how collaboration helps in creating common standards that then can be widely adopted and then and thereby increase adoption. Right? If you go to the next slide. So this slightly detail on what we did along with EDSA. So when the software carbon intensity standard was first published, because sort of we had a real in-depth knowledge of sort of what we were trying to do through this measurement, we then developed sort of an ecosystem of tools for plugging into the production portfolio of the applications and creating a dashboard, a real-time dashboard that then gives you an SEI score across sort of portfolio of applications. Now, this does two things. One, it helps you, as the first bit of measurement, it helps you prioritize where the maximum sort of carbon footprint is within your application portfolio and what action to take. So that's the first step, sort of measure and then sort of prioritize. If you move to the next slide. So then I'm going to talk about and then I'm going to talk about sort of some the next bits. The next part I'm talking about is our team in Japan. So the team in Japan contributed significantly to the development of a carbon-aware SDK. This is one of the projects within the Green Software Foundation. Now, they use this knowledge to create tools, services, and propositions that can have a significant impact. If you move to the next one. So I'm going to focus on one of the accelerators that was created. So using the carbon-aware SDK and also working with CNCF's Kepler project, what the team has developed is a scheduler where, when you have workloads, you can run the workloads in the greenest possible sort of location around the world. So this is the contribution from our team in Japan. And then, sort of if you move to the next one, I'll bring it all together in the end. The next team to contribute is a team in Germany. So we've got the Green Software Patterns project. So once you measure, once you know what the levers are, what change do you make? So the Green Software Patterns is a repository of all the best practices that you can do to then decrease the carbon footprint, where you measure, you found out sort of what to work on. Now sort of you take actions to reduce. So that's the Green Software Patterns. Again, we've been working with a large community. The team at DAC has contributed a number of software patterns to this project, but they've also sort of developed interesting accelerators around that. And that accelerator is basically sort of a test harness. If you move to the next slide. So here, there's a test harness where you can quickly test, take each pattern and do, sort of before implementation of the pattern and after implementation of the pattern, you can measure the exact sort of difference in SEI. So this is something that they've developed. And now this is using the SEI calculator that was developed by the first team. So this is how sort of communities around the world are coming together in both contributing to the standards and also sort of creating the ecosystem of tools and then helping our customers implement it. Thanks. Thanks for that. So that's the end of.
Thank you so much, Gadu. Really insightful presentations. I think the common theme, at least what I captured, is once you know what needs to change, then you can actually move forward and start making those changes. You can start making those changes or setting those actions, identifying those resources. Pindi, also, you talked quite a bit about embodied emissions, and it was really interesting to hear how UBS refined and improved its approach using the SCI specification. Massimo, you spoke a lot about regulations, and thank you for sort of educating us on the ESRS. and how it's defining sort of the taxonomy for the CSRD. You mentioned one thing around like the SCI really allowing CAST to understand those critical subsets that need to be addressed. And I think it kind of ties the whole story here quite nicely. It is time for Q&A, and we are getting a few questions in. I thought I would start first with what is one piece of advice you can share with teams interested in using the SCI? Hindi, perhaps we can start with you, then Gadu, go to you, and then Massimo, end with you.
So my key advice would be to go through the spec and try it. I think by just breaking down every single component of that calculation, you'll learn a lot about how your IT infrastructure and software applications run. You'll also be able to work out where you can get the data and also identify the gaps. So I think by just trialing it, you'll get a good sense of how you can potentially calculate, and then, like Gadu said earlier, the potential to automate as well. So yeah, I'd get stuck in.
Gadu, you're up. Do you have any pearls of wisdom?
I'll add to that. Again, start with whatever you have. Understand the formulas. And understand sort of what you'll need to provide for embodied emissions, the grid carbon intensity, and sort of energy. We deliberately, while creating the SEI standard, we've deliberately included all of those factors, even though they are difficult to calculate, because that gives your true carbon footprint. Now, we understand that sort of some of that data is not readily available. Embodied emissions, sometimes sort of it's difficult to get. There are a lot of resources on the GSF website. Go through them, but sort of start using them and start using whatever data you have. For example, for grid carbon intensity, you might not have real-time data, but you have country average emissions, etc. Right? What's important in following the standard is being the transparency of how you're doing it, rather than sort of the accuracy, right? Sort of as long as you say, okay, this is the level of granularity I could get from my data, start measuring and reporting that. Then sort of increase the granularity as and when you get more detailed data. That's my advice.
Thank you, Gadu. Thank you, Gadu. Massimo?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with Gadu, because if there is one thing I hope that Ricardo agree with me that we learn, is that we need to start with the data we have, and then we refine time to time. And the fact that we're measuring is forcing the organization to provide more data. Because sometimes say, oh, no, this is wrong because it's too high. Okay, give me the data, I can recalculate it and then give you a better data. So it's for sure, start, circulate the numbers internally, and that will create culture, a bit like Pidi was saying before. It's about seeding a culture into a company. And because of my job, I'm used to measure and then use the measure to change the organization. So it's really the way it went. Probably, I don't know, Ricardo, if you want to add something.
No, I totally agree. The most difficult part is try to familiarize the people and technical people with the importance of numbers to let decision more precise, and the importance of measurement and KPIs is very fundamental on this field. Otherwise, we are talking about nothing. So it's very important to address questions like sustainability, talking about number, and base the decision on the numbers that we have.
Thank you so much. We also have another question here. How are you changing cultures so employees are thinking about sustainability during decision making? And perhaps I can piggyback off of this and ask, what has been the most effective way of educating or raising awareness about green software principles, standards, the way we need to think about measurement? Gadu, can we start with you?
So the number one thing is raising awareness, putting this in front of people. For us, what we have done is we've tried to the Green Software for Practitioners course that was built through the GSF. We are rolling it out across sort of a global workforce, which is number one, at least let the software engineers know the basic principles of software engineering. So the next thing that we're doing is now we're working on a pretty ambitious plan for every service that we provide. We want an SEI number, right? So that sort of, or the decisions that people make when delivering those services become very visible. That's more difficult, that's more longer term, but start with awareness. Once they're aware, then give people the tools, right, to enable them to then sort of make those decisions and be aware of those decisions. And I think that going back to the TOS project that Pendy was working on, that's one big that's a huge area. It's a big change management program across your organization. Think of it as as that, and the TOS framework will help you take the right steps towards that. So if interested, you can go to our GitHub site and go through that. But that's what some of the actions that we're taking.
Thank you, Gadu. Pindi, anything to add?
Thank you, Gadu, for plugging TOS. I reiterate what Gadu has said. So one of the key observations that I found is that sustainability really does bring people together. It's the first time in my career that we can collaborate across industries, across companies, because we're all going through the same thing or similar things, right? We all want to reduce our emissions. So that's what has made it so much easier, and the GSF, being really pivotal in the technology space. We've also shared best practices, done digital detox campaigns, and really simplified the energy metrics, so kilowatt per hours. What does that mean? So we equate it to flying, to boiling a kettle. How many houses would you run if we switched off this application for a weekend? So really making it personable, I think, has really helped. In conjunction with that, same as Gadu, we have brought in the GSF training in-house. So our DevOps community can take that training, take the course, and pass the exam. And we've had some great numbers that are going through that process. And in conjunction with that, we've also recognized that there is the training that provides us the basic language and understanding of what green software means or what SCI means and the language associated with that. But also, what more can we do? So there is so much appetite to build tools, to build smart ways of working on different platforms with a sustainability focus. So we've introduced an additional certification, which is also in-house. So really empowering our engineering community. And again, it's great to see, and the appetite, the engagement is there.
Thank you, Pindi. We're getting a lot of questions coming in. So I apologize, we're not going to be able to get through all of them. We have a really interesting one, which I believe Gadu wants to chime in on. The question is, does it make sense to measure the FDI of individual services and applications rather than the complete tech estate of your organization? Or are they both valuable for different purposes? So perhaps, Gadu, I can have you go first, and then Massimo, and then Pindi.
How to do look at what your responsible for and what the outcome you're responsible for. So for us as an SI, where I provide a service to a customer and I manage it, then the footprint of that is important. If you're building a product, the product footprint is important. For UBS, for example, that like, sort of the carbon footprint of their IT estate is important, right? So look at it like, sort of what you're responsible for and create that boundary, and then like, sort of you can measure that.
Thank you, Gadu. Massimo?
Yes, actually, the way we are seeing working with Ricardo, but also on other projects, is that the bricks of the whole building is starting measuring at the asset level. So whatever it is in the application database or whatever you want to call it, then you put together all the bricks that compose a service, and then you have exactly this, the reporting focused on services. But you need to start from the base measurement and then build up on that. Frankly, we have very few cases in which the maturity is there to be able to measure services impact. Now we are more at the asset level, application level. That's what we see, at least in Italy.
Thank you, Massimo. Pindi, anything to add?
I think both Massimo and Gadu are spot on. It's at the asset level, but I do see a future where it will be service or product level, where you can see the full front to back SCI calculation for that service. But I don't think we're there yet, but we will get there.
Thank you,
Brick
Pindi.
by brick.
There was actually a question specifically for UBS. Can you share any major challenges UBS faced in testing the SCI?
I think the key thing is it was a manual process in terms of diving into the data sources, capturing that data, and then calculating up. But we weren't surprised. We knew that. What we would like to do is make it more automated, so you don't have to manually calculate. But that is coming. That is something that we're working on.
Thank you. We've got another question here in the chat coming from hardware LCA calculation. Isn't the development and distribution phase of the software products missing in the SCI? Gadu, perhaps you can take this one.
Yeah. This is the, if I understood it right, like, sort of it is the generic footprint, like, sort of involved in developing like the software product. Yes, okay, right, like, it's not explicitly called out in, right, like, sort of the SCI framework, but again, I think that, like, sort of you should be able to calculate it. I think the SCI is designed for the software in production. If you're trying to calculate, like, sort of the SCI of a software product end to end, slightly different calculation, you can add it on. But like, it provides you a component of, right, like, sort of the software running on that, like, either your development environments or test environments or the production environments. The labor part of it, and like, any transport that you would like to tag on to that, like, sort of, I think you need to build that up.
Thank you, Gadu. Massimo, Pindi, did you have anything you wanted to add?
No, not from my side.
No, but the only thing I would add, adding transport in, all the extra, I think it's a huge data set. There's a lot to consider. Just getting the SCI for your application, it can be tough, right? I think this is going to be an iterative process.
Yeah, thank you. On to the next question. Are there any examples you can share of changes you've made that have had the biggest impact in terms of carbon emission reductions? Massimo, would you like to go first?
Yeah, well, actually, there are. In the very first phase of the project we are running with Ricardo, we just took it was the typical pilot to prove that the methodology was working. It's pretty normal, but eventually it was an interesting exercise because we take a data lake area. So it was a set of cloud native application running on one of the major three cloud service provider. I'm not going to do any advertisement for that. And that was supposed to be very, very sustainable. The end of the story is that by measuring them and fixing basically most of the issues that has been identified in the analysis with the ASGS-RM standard, we had a 15% reduction in terms of emissions, of course, based on the calculation we did, but it has been calculated. So it's huge, even considering cloud native applications that are running in a cloud, in a pure cloud environment, and data intensive because it's a data lake. So that was the example that said, wow, if we obtain this in this environment, that should be leading edge in terms of sustainability, also in terms of sustainability, then everything started rolling pretty smoothly. Okay, we need to run into the whole portfolio. And now we saw from the data that Ricardo shared that the potential saving is even much, much higher. One thing that I recommend, because it's something that we probably didn't consider when we started this journey 4 years ago, it is selecting correctly the critical subset of a portfolio, because you can easily end up measuring and improving application that literally produce 1 kilo of CO2 per year because it's used one time a year from the CEO. But maybe it's totally unsustainable because it's inefficient and so, but you need to select. So the SCI due diligence we run at the beginning is crucial, because then you concentrate on what matters, that normally answer to the Pareto law. 20% that produce 90% of the carbon emissions.
Wow, thank you. Pindi, did you have anything to add?
I totally agree with Massimo, and I think, you know, refactoring your applications on cloud native is super efficient and powerful to reduce your emissions. But there are also some really simple steps as well that organizations can do, which is, you know, the environments, the lower level environments, the dev and test environments. If you're not using them, switch them off. You know, don't keep them running 24 hours a day, right? And saving documents, for example, you don't need every single version of that document. Everything takes power. So there are some really simple things that we could do. And then obviously it gets more and more complicated as you start to re-engineer applications and really think about your energy efficiency targets.
Thank you.
And again, I think the patterns project has a list of at various levels for front end, for cloud. What are the levers that you can use? What can you do to reduce? For example, one of the things that the entity data R&D team have done was they are heavy contributors to the Open SDK Java project. They've shown how, like, you know, just through some containerization, you can and a version change, you can reduce the energy use of a large Java application by 70%. So it's a simple trick, right? Like, you know, sort of some, you know, as the versions increase, they take advantage of the new power management features of newer servers. Cloud native provides you, right, like, you know, sort of a you know, just-in-time use of resources and moving again to, right, like, you know, sort of to functions or serverless. You know, even further optimizes that. So those are some of the examples.
Thank you, Gadu. Ricardo, did you have anything you wanted to add?
No, it's okay. And above all, the things that said before Pindi about the environmental test that we can shut down is a real thing, and above all, it costs less for a company. So it's a virtuous circle in that sense. No, it doesn't cost more to implement a green action. The total cost of ownership is going less and less, so lesser and lesser. So this is a virtuous circle, in my opinion. So it's okay. It's something feasible.
Thank you so much. There's one more question, and we've got 4 minutes, so it's going to be a bit of a fire round. How is the CSRD impacting your ICT department? Pindi, did you want to take that first?
Yeah, sure. We are gathering data, scope 3 emissions, the value chain. It's a huge amount of work. But the great thing is, again, we're working in collaboration with our vendors and trying to really ascertain their roadmaps, which we've already started doing years ago by collecting data in the CDP through voluntary disclosures. So there is a lot of work to do, but we have been working on it systematically for a while now. But yes, it will get easier, but I think we're at that crunch phase at the moment.
Thank you, Pindi. Gadu?
Yeah, and for us, it's two ways. We as entity data, and it's our own disclosure CSRD. We're working on that, and also like sort of and I think that it's a big data problem more than anything else. and so we've got our I think set of assets. There's something called CTurtle where we're working with the CDP specifically sort of around this topic. So yes, yeah.
Thank you. And Massimo?
Well, the impact on us as a small company is not huge because we are literally very small and very distributed in the world. But on the project we are seeing, starting from the one we're looking at with Ricardo, we are seeing that in certain sectors, when you see extremely IT-intensive companies, service companies, government companies, also Autostrada, even if their really scope 3 is coming from somewhere else, not from IT, but still, the impact of CSRD on the company is huge already now, and is going to be bigger and bigger. The regulation are starting slowly, meaning there will be tolerance at the beginning, but as it happened for GDPR a few years back, after 2 years from the starting date, nobody will be allowed to take shortcuts or avoid to report. So it's a game changer, like GDPR was in another sector.
Thank you so much. I think it's safe to say we've learned a lot about embodied carbon, we've learned embodied emissions, you've learned a lot about the SCI, we've learned a lot about how regulation is impacting measurements. Thank you to everyone for joining us today. For more information about the SCI specification or how you can apply it, I've shared a link in the chat for use case submissions, so please take a look and explore those. If you're interested in working with the GSF and our network of members, I've shared a link to join to learn more about how you can join the foundation. Thank you to all of our speakers. Thank you, Massimo. Thank you, Pindi. Thank you, Greg. Thank you. Massimo. Thank you, Ricardo. Thank you, Gadu. And we will see you soon.
Bye. See you soon. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks
Bye.
to you all. Bye-bye.
Ciao.